Cool.
So how long have you been doing therapy-related stuff, coaching-related stuff?
Well, I started doing hypnosis as a hobby, as an interest, as one of those things which kind of whet my appetite. And the first person I ever hypnotized was in 1996, which was a guy in India who was a medical doctor. And I took him on a holiday, on a visual journey around New York, because that's something he always wanted to do. Yeah, and it was an interesting start to it, because I noticed at that point when we came out of the hypnosis that the whole time shift of how long he believed he was in hypnosis was very different to the reality of how long it was. I mean, you know, I took him on a long shopping journey around, you know, New York, going through, you know, the streets and Macy's and that kind of stuff. And when we came out, I said, how long do you think we've been going? He said, oh, about 20 minutes. And it was probably closer on to about an hour and a half, or maybe closer to 2 hours.
So there was a whole shrunk time.
It shrunk time. Yeah, time shifts when you're relaxed in probably it's because the brain, you know, is not being stressed and it's in the parasympathetic. So, then after that, I kind of picked up a load of books and started reading it, practicing with other people. And then when I came back from my travels, which I was out for around about 3.5 years traveling at that point, I got back to the UK completely broke. And I thought, well, I know these tricks that I've picked up on my journey. You know, are they worth anything? Do they work? And so I used a little bit of a technique Bandler teaches, which is like timeline therapy. There's a couple of people that teach it, but yeah, the idea is you set a goal in the future. And I thought, well, you know, let's go crazy here. Set a goal to make $1 million. And at this time, I was completely broke. I got back to the UK with no money, completely broke. Consequently, over that time, what happened is my decisions that I made guided me towards basically running a business. And by 1999, I had a company set up called Anglo-American Components, which later became Anglo-American International Limited. Within the first quarter, I made a turnover of $900,000.
Impressive.
So yeah, I was like, wow, okay. So I tested this stuff out with the NLP and the hypnosis, and then I thought, well, there's something in this. It works, you know. And then, you know, I ran this business until 2006, I believe it was. Made enough money to buy myself a house, and then decided, look, this was an experiment. Had to remind myself, you know, it's not really what I want to do. My interest is in this and the psychology and the applied psychology. So I went back into training, started running the Brighton NLP group, become an NLP practitioner, just a basic practitioner. Then I took on the NLP group in Brighton, and from that, I basically could pick and choose who I wanted to come along each month, and so I could pick up their brains and get like a watered down version of what they were doing within the psychology stuff. So I managed over 2 years to get a lot of free stuff, a lot of free training. Mm-hmm. And then in 2008, I started with Andy Austin's IEMT around about 2008, I think it was. I started taking on clients after, you know, almost 12 years of dipping my toe in and practicing different techniques. 2008, I started charging clients, not a lot of money, you know, which I still don't charge a lot of money, I don't think, but, you know, £30 for a session, kind of stuff. And then from there on, I went into sort of advanced practitioner IEMT, and then I picked up loads of other different skills. I spent quite a few years teaching body language, non-verbal body language. Worked with a lot of student dentist training. So we taught them basic low-level hypnosis, NLP, effective communications. I did that for quite a few years. And then basically I've just kept on going and doing different things. It's a hobby of mine, you know, as well as a career. So I dropped out of running my electronics company, which I did have a background in from when I left college, you know, as a student, left college as a teenager. And I basically had a huge vocational shift in 2008. 2006, I quit my company, Anglo-American Components International, and I went full-time as a therapist. So it's been a long journey.
16 years so far.
Yeah, many years of studying and just, you know, learning the ropes and basically trial and error with a lot of stuff.
With the dentist, did you have like the hypnosis for doing surgeries on the hypnosis part, or was it just the communication bit and the?
Yeah, there's a guy called Mike Gow, he's actually a practicing dentist. He's out there. If you can look him up on the BBC, he's done a few live hypnotic surgeries with people where you can actually see them taken out and drilling into the front teeth under hypnosis with no pain. And when they finish and come out of it, there's still no pain. So the pain receptors are switched off. He's mastered doing that kind of work. The kind of stuff we were doing was more basically to get the person into a relaxed state and getting the communication skills with the dentist better, you know, which basically meant that you could use less anesthetic with the person. You know, when somebody's got really bad problem with their teeth and they refuse and they have a phobia of going to the dentist, they tend to have like 5 times as much anesthetic to try and numb that pain. And in fact, it's not making any difference. It's the brain amplifying and paying attention to it that's causing it. So we teach them how to, you know, change that. I spent maybe a few years doing that, maybe 3 or 4 years doing that.
Very nice. And then did you switch, like taking regular therapy clients before you shifted to the more health-oriented stuff, or how did that transition happen?
I've basically covered loads. I mean, I've worked with quite a lot of depression, anxiety issues, everything that all of the systematic problems that come along, you know, everything from poor sleep quality, overeating, biting their nails, smoking, you know, all of the kind of things that people use as self-soothing for their anxiety issues. That's what people identify and they come to me. But the underlying thing is, you know, to deal with the coded in bad memories that they've had using either hypnosis or NLP techniques or IEMT or metaphor work. So yeah, the idea is to get to the root of it if you can, you know, or the thing that's causing the trigger, let's say.
Okay. And why psoriasis? I mean, you wrote the first published paper using integral eye movement therapy and other stuff you do on psoriasis. What got you there?
Yeah, I mean, it came across my radar when I noticed the IEMT Association were looking for people to work with either, I think it was with either psoriasis or something else. I can't remember. There was another thing, like maybe it was
tinnitus.
A what?
Tinnitus.
No, it wasn't tinnitus. It was psoriasis or PTSD, I think it was.
Okay.
And I just happened to know somebody that basically developed psoriasis kind of recently in the local area. And I approached him and I said, look, you know, we can do the work for you on this for free. So it's not going to cost you anything. Just all we need to do is take some photographs and see if it works. The guy, he was like, yeah, great. Yeah, we'll do that. He was also suffering from having epileptic seizures. So he had epilepsy. So there was a bit of a controversial thing with it, because obviously I'm only really targeting the psoriasis, but how can I target the psoriasis and not deal with the epilepsy? Consequently, when the psoriasis went, the epilepsy went as well.
Nice.
So he's been clear, and now that I know of it, since 2016 I did the work with him. The paper was published in 2018. He's not had a reoccurrence of either condition, neither epilepsy or psoriasis since. And there's photographs, proof of that, taken of the area and dated and time-stamped and everything else. So I got into psoriasis because of, it was like,
Can you call it a coincidence?
It was a coincidence. Maybe there's a psychosomatic ailment involved with this, It turned out there was. It's not always the case. Some cases, I think, with people is they may have had a viral infection. They might have had, some kind of bacterial infection. They might have a long-term other problems. Usually what we see is, we see other issues that people have, comorbidities, obesity, alcoholism, or Crohn's disease or whatever. So, targeting just the psoriasis on its own, there needs to be a fairly deep level of assessment to find out what else is going on.
So is it more of a holistic thing, like you targeting different areas of a person's life? Or if somebody has psoriasis, how would they start exploring how is this happening with them?
My attitude of looking at psoriasis isn't actually a disease as such. What's going on is the body basically, it's constantly trying to rid itself full of toxins, whether those toxins are from our breath or from our food or from our lifestyle. We've got a couple of very powerful and strong systems inside of us to get rid of toxins. So, our liver, for example, is the main sort of way our body filters out our blood and gets rid of toxins. And then, we've got our kidneys for clearing out, the blood and everything else, so, and then we've also got our lungs. So these are major vital organs in the body that are working hard to get rid of toxins. But the toxins that come into our body also are created in our body. So, for example, if we're paying attention, really deep attention for a long amount of time, it could be playing a video game or something really quite taxing on the brain, then the brain produces a lot of neurotoxins. And it's only at nighttime when we go into sleep, into deep sleep, that the brain can get in there and clear out these toxins from the brain to give you a fresh brain the next day. The same thing about the endotoxins that develop in the gut biome. So our bacteria basically that lives in the colon and a lot of the time with people in the small intestines, they've got SIBO. So the small intestine bacterial overgrowth that lives in there, it shouldn't really be there as such. And it leaks toxins, and sometimes we absorb some of the nutrients from that, but most of the time it's not really beneficial to us,
Mm-hmm.
And so our body's basically dealing with clearing out these toxins constantly, whether they're developed inside of us or whether, it's something that we're consuming or breathing in or smoking or drinking or whatever. It's interesting that people don't realize how toxic alcohol is, for example.
Mm-hmm.
It's called intoxicated when you get drunk, because of the toxins. And and your body basically, it gets less and less efficient at dealing with this over time. As we get older, our liver tends to sort of not be as efficient. And so we need to give it breaks. We need to give it, some intermittent fasting helps every now and then.
Yeah, alcohol is part of society since whenever it's part of religions, it's part of many different things. I read something funny today, and it's not funny, but it's like it's related to alcohol. So it's the only drug that we have to explain why we don't want to have it. If we're with a group of friends or we're having a dinner or something, the person who's not drinking, there's something wrong with them. But I mean, this doesn't happen if somebody is using different kinds of drugs. Nobody would ask. They would just like have the Alcoholics Anonymous.
What's the problem? Why are you not drinking? Are you sick? Are you sick?
Mm-hmm.
What's the problem? Have you got antibiotics? Have you got an alcoholic problem? No,
exactly.
I don't drink. So therefore, how come it's me with the problem? You've got the problem. But, we've got these nuances, and it's social conditioning, and it's, you know, it's like it's been said many times, especially Andrew Austin's pushed this many times, and he says, you know, it's the blameless drug, you know. It's promoted as making people happy. It's the happy lifestyle. It's the cool, trendy thing to do. It's even built into our language, like Merry Christmas. You know, merry basically means to get drunk. You know, it's there. It's a dangerous toxin.
Another thing that's pushed around that's not a drug but has lots of toxins is food. Like when you go with friends, with family, the amount of food that's pushed, especially socially in specific situations, is one of the causes of stress, one of the causes of the body to respond in these kinds of ways, right?
Hugely, yeah. You know, a lot of animals who eat vegetables have a specific type of vegetables that they can tolerate. So, for example, just pull something out the air. You know, koala bears, they eat the eucalyptus trees, I think. And so that's toxically poison to anybody. Any other animal cannot eat that. But that animal is built up through the arms race of being able to deal with those toxins and absorb the nutrients from it without any adverse effects. But, you know, these animals, they've evolved alongside the plants. There's other animals like, you know, cows, who will basically predominantly eat grass, and that's great for them, you know, grass or grain or whatever. But really, you know, cow has 3 or 4 stomachs. I'm not sure if it's 3 or 4. You could check up on this, but that process has to be filtered through the cow before that cow can actually take the nutrients out. You know, for humans, we've got a diet which is so diverse. There is no way that we've basically evolved to deal with all of the different toxins that are naturally occurring in all of these plants. Nightshades, for example, a lot of people react to tomatoes, potatoes. You know, people die every year in America because of reaction to just normal potatoes. Nuts are the same. People dying on having nuts that are in food. You know, so plants have got this, you know, plants since the beginning of time have to defend themselves, because literally they wouldn't be here. If plants were consumed by animals and with no defense to stop those animals from eating them, they just simply wouldn't evolve so that they're here now. So plants can't run away. They can't hide. They can't defend themselves. What they do is they infuse their stems, their leaves, and their fruit with toxins. You know, it's been identified, but there's not a lot of people that realize that, you know, things like our common foods, 100 of our most common foods contain 50 or 60 different carcinogenic toxins in them. And plants use this to defend themselves. One of the most poisonous things that are out there is in gluten. It's the protein that's in gluten. It was a research paper came out recently. I could probably link to it later on, but there was a research paper that came out and it identified the protein that's specifically in gluten that damages and causes leaky gut syndrome, which is a major cause. I mean, that leaky gut leads to bacteria getting through the system and, you know, inflammation. And that's the root cause for all of the problems we see with autoimmune diseases. So there's, you know, things like that, you know, people need to be aware of it. Some people can tolerate it because they've evolved through their ancestry, a way of tolerating dairy, for example, or tolerating gluten. But yeah, there's a lot of other people who are highly sensitive, and things like celiac disease come through, and, you know, that leads to osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, all kinds of stuff. But, you know, plants in themselves, they're not filtered. So if you eat the plant, then you are the filter. Your liver and your kidneys has to filter out those toxins. But if you eat the animal that's eaten the plant, then they've done the filtering for you. And unfortunately, as somebody who was, you know, a vegetarian myself for 13 years.
13 years.
13 years, yeah. I suffered the consequences of that. Yeah, I had all kinds of GI problems because of everything from, you know, gas to GERD and everything in between. So
yeah. before moving to the relationship between mental health stuff and gastric stuff. What was the reason you entered into vegetarianism, and what got you out of it?
I got into it mostly because I've always had a very close relationship with animals. I love animals. I traveled a lot, and I've spent a lot of time trying to protect wildlife. The orangutans in Sumatra, the white rhinos in Africa. This is part of my sort of growing up. To do my little bit. I mean, the company that I had set up in 1999, which was the stockbroking company, it was actually one of the world's first companies to be carbon neutral. So it was registered as a carbon neutral company. It was one of the world's first international companies registered as carbon neutral. So that meant that all of the energy that we used, I mean, this is 21 years ago, before it was trendy. Everything that we used, including the travel from staff to come into work, the warehouses in Singapore, the warehouses in Boston, in New York, outside, was all calculated to see how much energy we're using. And then what we would do is we'd send those digits and those data to, I think it was Edinburgh University, where they would have some guys work out how much carbon we were using, and they would plant trees to absorb that carbon back into the system. Nice. So, this is something I was predominantly pushing towards. But the problem I found with becoming vegetarian at that point was that it had a long-term detrimental effect on my body. Now, I don't know if it's the same for other people. I'm O blood type, and apparently in places like Japan, a lot of people eat depending on their blood type. So now I've moved over to, a carnivore diet, which is not 100%. It's probably I'm getting 70% of my calories from more carnivore, but less from carbohydrates, and there's not a lot of food that I'm eating, which is raw foods, and not a lot of raw vegetables. So they must be cooked to break down the toxins. And I find that's helped. I personally lost over the last 2 months about a stone in UK money. That works out around about 7 kilos or 8 kilos or something, Yeah, maybe, about 8 kilos. And yourself, you've done it yourself. You've had the same experience, I believe.
Yeah, the carnivore diet for me had a shift in my gut issues related to reflux, related to IBS symptoms, to gas. So it had a huge shift, and I had a drop of around 8 to 9 kilograms during this period, and in a month of time, which was a huge difference. I know it's a work in progress, because I've had digestive issues for a very, very, very long time, but it's helped out a lot in many different ways. So it was very helpful.
Yeah, it's a fast track. I mean, look, the idea is that if you've done everything you can and you're still overweight or going in that direction, I mean, throughout the COVID period, I gained close on to...
Everybody gained during the COVID period by sitting at home.
Kilos or something ridiculous.
Wow.
And it was too much for me. So I was desperately looking for a way to get rid of that again. Mm-hmm. And so I'm still doing it, and I'll still run it. But, obviously we do need to get a variation of different, prebiotics, from plants and fruits and stuff like this. But yeah, I think the ratio needs to be shifted so people are actually, healthier. I don't think we need to be pushing ourselves to going on to vegetarian, which is what I was doing, or raw diets, because the sheer amount of toxins in plants it's eventually going to be overwhelming.
But on the other hand, you have lots of the media on social media pushing for vegetarianism, for veganism, and for the alternative stuff. Like, for example, I'm somebody who has allergy towards soybeans and stuff related to that, and that's embedded in many of the manufactured food, the soybeans and stuff. So it's been also an experience of years having things I react to physically without even knowing. So it's it's a lifetime job just to observe what's entering our body and what's exiting, whether it's thoughts, whether it's food, whether it's anything related to our interaction to the world.
Do you know, it's a strange thing. There was a book I've just read recently. I think it's called The Big Fat Surprise.
Okay.
A New York lady, brilliant book. But that reveals that there was a scientific kind of sleight of hand, let's say, where the research basically looked at how fat in our diet was a problem for basically bad health and increased heart tissues and cardio problems. But what was revealed is the data was adjusted so it fit the goal. Now, this was done around about 50 years ago. And then from that, we've seen obesity levels, especially in the Western world, just increase skyrocket. And it's caused a lot of problems. Now it's fixed in the psyche of a lot of people that fat is bad for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, talking to people saying,
in parallel, you have the non-fat shaming, the fat acceptance, and this is just, so it's increasing people's health problems and then getting others to accept them as if it's part of natural normal life, which is sad.
The problem is if you're obese, then you're likely 50% more increased chance of catching all of the other diseases. You know, your health, you might, you know, think, yeah, fat is beautiful, big is beautiful and everything, but actually your longevity and your health is at risk simply because you're carrying all of that extra weight on the body. So it's just hard. It's hard to get rid of it. Once you start putting those pounds on, it's difficult to get rid of it. And the only thing that I found that works specifically for me was to eat more fat, animal-based fat. Kept me satiated, so I didn't feel constantly like snacking all the time and, you know, craving sugary things and cakes and all of the stuff like that. And it's quite an easy thing to follow. It's easy to stick to, you know.
The past 2 weeks for me, I've shifted a bit from the carnivore due to personal circumstances, and the snacking just skyrocketed because I didn't have as much fat as I was having the first 3 weeks when I was doing the carnivore diet. So it's very interesting how the body responds to these small changes, small shifts.
Yeah, it's been identified. There's certain, obviously we know that the gut biome, the bacteria that's in our gut does have an influence on us, you know. There is bacteria that basically has been identified to lead into people with schizophrenia. There's bacteria that leads to OCD and a type of autism in children. You know, there's bacteria that, you know, basically is a sugar-based bacteria that once you start cheating, having cheat days from the carnivore diet and eating sugar, then that will make you crave it even more. And they've identified that as a particular type of bacteria that makes us do that. And it's unconscious, you know. Why do I craving more sugar, you know? And I'm not thinking about it. It's just being controlled by an alien that lives inside of us, you know.
True, very true. So the correlation between these kinds of things and mental health, is it directly linked? Is it a side effect? So what does our eating habits and our drinking habits have to as an impact on our mental health from your perspective and experience?
Absolutely. You know, basically, if you were to research a lot of what the doctors are saying, people like Dr. Chaffee on the internet, he's very outspoken about this. And he says that, you know, basically humans, all of the tests we do on rats are not the same as on humans because each animal has a specific diet that is, you know, evolved for that animal. That's why they are that animal. But what he says about humans is we're a strange lot. We've got this extra bit of brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is developed over a period of maybe 7 to 10 million years. It's a long time. And in order for that extra brain to grow, it meant that we needed to get more energy and reduce the size of our gut. So if you look at a gorilla has a great big fat belly. And that's there for breaking down all of the plant-based foods and get enough energy out of that. And big, strong gorilla. but it also has what we used to have as an appendix, which is basically redundant these days. Our appendix is maybe 3 or 4 inches long at maximum, was a gorilla's are really about 1/2 meter long. And inside of that gorilla's appendix there is a whole farm of bacteria that basically picks up all of that plant-based matter, breaks it down, and then the gorilla then breaks down the bacteria and takes the nutrients and the minerals from that. So there is a farming effect that goes on. As humans evolved over the last 7 to 10 million years, our appendix shrunk. So it's not really any use anymore. It's still got bacteria in it and causes problems. A lot of people have it removed. It doesn't really have any adverse effects having it removed. But what it does mean is that we basically don't really digest fiber very well. We still don't digest fiber. So when we go onto the carnivore diet, what happens is we get all of the nutrients out of the meat and the fat. And that basically helps our brain to keep it flourished with lots of omega-3 and omega-6. But what we find in the Western diet is a lot of people have got a ratio of omega-6 around to omega-3 of around about 40 to 1. It should be around about 4 to 1. And that's what our brain is made from. Our brain is made from these fats, these particular fats, and it needs it to grow. So what we're finding is people who are having gut problems, people are having things like Crohn's and depression and IBS and anxiety. It's all linked. There's a link to that.
And you know what's funny is, sorry to interrupt you here. You go to any doctor, they might say, increase your fiber intake.
Yes, I know.
That's the first thing they say.
But that's not really good advice. It seems to be an echo chamber. A lot of people are not really looking at the effects of that. They're just repeating it without really measuring the feedback. If you go and have a look at some of the feedback people are actually talking about on the videos on YouTube, underneath, real people who are giving testimonials about their life changes. A lot of people are having anxiety disappear. A lot of people are having depression go, they're losing weight, things like extreme cases of arthritis are going, a lot of autoimmune diseases are going. I mean, it's not the golden bullet, it's not a panacea change into that, but it's an elimination diet. So all of the toxins and everything that we've been consuming, at least for a couple of months, are going to be clear. It'll give the liver a chance to heal and the non-vital organs and the organs to get switched back on again. And hopefully the body can go back into homeostasis, which means that, everything from, sperm production, ovulation, depression, anxiety can all start to reset, And I think it's something that a lot of people can benefit from. The other side of it is that if the person, just fixing the body alone isn't just going to solve it, because the brain and the body, you fix the body, it doesn't last until you fix the brain. You fix the brain and that won't last until you fix the body. So it's a two-pronged attack, And unfortunately, a lot of people with traumatic experiences, that's stored, that gets coded in their memory, and that makes them more trigger happy, let's say. It makes them, the startle effect of having that trauma means that whenever they get triggered, it triggers off the fight or flight response. That process of the fight or flight response removes all of the visceral blood, pumps it into the big muscles, so they can fight or flight, run away or flight. But then what happens is that the bacteria that lives in their intestinal system, in their colon, sits there without being picked up, and it infuses into their system. And then when the blood does come back and relax, the liver can't deal with it, overloads. And I think that's what's causing a lot of the autoimmune problems, specifically on the psoriasis. So, that the 10 kilos or so what you lost when you lost that weight, what people don't realize, Ronnie, is that those kilos, the actual body mass, it leaves through your breath. Like 84% of it leaves through your breath, through through the carbon dioxide as you breathe out. The rest of it leaves as water. It converts into water, and we urinate it out. So it goes that way. So people don't realize, you need to do exercise. You need to basically get some good sleep at night. That's where your brain gets cleared, your body heals itself. So, if I'm looking at a client with a problem, I would first look at how well they're sleeping at night and their regular sleeping patterns, because that's where the body does a lot of the cleansing. And if it's a case of, they're having too much sugar because, they're having too much sugar, then they're not going to sleep at night because the body's processing that sugar. So why are they having too much sugar? Maybe it's comfort eating. They're comfort eating because there's something in their mind that basically is constantly making them crave sugar to feel comfort. And, if it's something like they're not sleeping well at night because of their,
caffeine intake for some people.
Caffeine intake, you reduce the caffeine. You look at basically what's causing them to not heal. And then you reverse that and have a look. Is it a physiological thing? Is it a psychological thing? But it's different for every person,
So if we were to put like a checklist for somebody who has skin issues as a starting point to start shifting things, a start it yourself, let's say, list, what would that be like?
Well, what I would do first, I'd have a look at the lifestyle, and the history. So I'd have a detailed case history from the client. I'd have a look at any childhood adversity issues and any PTSD issues, and what medications they're taking, what their diet is, their social environment. Some people just are very lonely and isolated. So they'll comfort eat because of that. Well, they could be in a relationship, in a marriage, but it's an unhappy marriage. And because of that, they're basically finding, ways of getting out of their head or whatever,
So the coping mechanism, which is related to
self-soothing techniques. And these can be toxic. Many, many times they'll be toxic, people drinking too much or smoking too much. These self-soothing techniques are adding extra toxins into the system. I'd look at what medications they're taking, how long they've been taking it. I had a conversation a couple of hours ago with a researcher on psoriasis who basically was interested in what I do and the work I do. And I was saying that, a lot of the medications people are on, it's repeat prescriptions, and they might be on them for 5 or 10 years. That's not good for them. Any medications like that for depression or long-term, issues, it's basically it's a short-term fix. So complementary medicine should be there to actually wean them off those addictions, wean them off those drugs, and then shift their lifestyle so that they can actually live with a healthy immunity system. We need our immunity system to protect us from all of the bad stuff that comes in. We can't just switch it off. We can't just switch adrenaline off because, it makes we're not more responsive and,
But we live in a one-button world. Like since the iPhone came out, everything is one button away. Yeah. So for health, for mental health, for changing life to a better place, people have this expectation of how quick can this be? What is the minimal thing I need to do? On the other hand, some stuff that have been building up for years, like the toxins or the repeated small traumas or the lifestyle or the relationships they've been in, their social circle, that needs a while until they can rebuild a different social circle, for example, eat better, lose the weight, build new habits.
And this is one of the problems a lot of people come across, because it's like, okay, my friends, they're all smoking and drinking, and I will lose all of my contacts with my friends if I change my lifestyle, because I won't be able to hang out with them anymore. I won't be able to spend time with them. And unfortunately, it's a tough decision to make. You either decide on your own health and make some lifestyle changes. That means getting rid of some of the old mates and the old friends that are toxic, the relationships that are toxic. And the thing is it's a risk, because it means that you don't know that it's going to work, and you only know it's going to work after you've felt the results and feel stronger and feel better, and you can actually do more and think clearer, and you've lost the fuzzy mind, and you're sleeping better at night, and you've got more energy, and you don't know that. It's a risk. So you're having to give up like the toxic friends, or the toxic habits, and the self-soothing techniques that you have with drinking and smoking and whatever it is, or eating junk food all the time, because you're going to have to get rid of that on the process, because you don't change and then get rid of that. You have to, that has to be part of the process of removing these toxic behaviors. And
one thing could be, from my experience at least, it's the fear of the reaction of the people around them, of their changes. They might be positive and might accept the change, might not do anything about it, but the fear of what people would think about them if they're not doing X, Y, Z habit, what would that be about?
So, well, it's like you were saying earlier about people, when you go out and socialize and you're not drinking, you've got to deal with those questions. Why aren't you drinking? Are you sick? And basically then you get isolated. You're not part of the gang. You're not part of their group anymore. And so, it's one of the biggest problems is, and a wise old man once told me, is that you decide what you put into your body, not anybody else. You decide what you put into your body. So if your friendship relies on you consuming what that person is consuming, then you need to make some new friends, and that's a trick call. People don't like change, because if you change, then it basically ups their standards. It makes them look bad. So they would sabotage that. They will try to make you feel bad so that you go back. And what you will find is you'll go round to their house. You tell them, look, I'm not eating that type of food. I don't drink anymore. And they'll turn up with drinks. They'll turn up with cake. They'll turn up with junk food. Say, hey, have some of this. It's really good. It's really nice. Have some of this. And you're like,
That's the same thing as the body, though. So the body has its homeostasis, and the social circle has its homeostasis. So when something shifts in a system, the whole system needs to react in certain ways to regain the balance. So the person can either, so the person can either shift their behavior inside the system and stay in the system and behave healthily, or they would need to exit it. So it's like, deal with the emotional reactions some you have with regards to the system around you, or just get out of the system and build another system that works.
There's an old story about the monk with a poison forest. I don't know if you've heard this. It goes around the houses a few times, but the guy basically is a monk, and he lives up in the monastery, and every day he goes down through the town and gets his vegetables and comes back. And on his way, there's a shortcut, and he has to go through a forest which is toxic. It's a poison forest. Nothing lives there. Everything's gray and dark and dies. And one day, as he's going through the forest, he finds this orchid that's growing. It's beautiful, colored orchid. It's just started to grow, and he notices it, and he comes back and he speaks to, the monastery, and the monks in the monastery, and they say, oh, well, that sounds like amazing. So he goes back there, and the next day he picks it and he brings it back, and he says, look, I've got to take it because it's going to die. This is a poison forest. Everything dies. I don't want to see this. Give it a chance. So he waters it and he feeds it and everything else, and it grows and it's beautiful. But then the monks say, look, it doesn't belong here. This isn't its home. It needs to go back to the forest, And of course, this is what we do in therapy. We take people and we bring them into our therapy rooms. We change how their mindset goes and nourish their mind and their body, and we get them to learn new habits, but then we put them back to where they came from.
Environment.
And of course, they go back into the old habits and they become sick again. So when we talk about making lifestyle changes, sometimes you have to get up and move. Sometimes you have to get up and go somewhere a little bit healthier. And that's not always easy. It's easier to get up and do that sometimes than it is to change everybody around you, And that's the problem. A lot of people try to change everybody around them rather than changing themselves.
True. Very true. They want to keep things as they are. Their homeostasis is what they need to keep, instead of the homeostasis of their bodies, the homeostasis of feeling good instead of just these like bursts of coping acts that don't last that much.
Yeah, well, the thing about our brain, this human brain, it's a strange thing. Over 7 to 10 million years, it's moved away from being like a great ape type brain. So it built this new bit on the front called the neocortex, and it's busy. It takes a lot of energy to keep this thing going. I mean, it can use up to a third of all of our bodily energy, in the daytime. So it's very hungry for energy. And the problem is that if we've got anxiety, if we've got unresolved problems in our past, then it's this part of the brain that chatters. It's constantly trying to solve that problem by talking it through. It sits there and it chats. So, man, I'm going to say this and maybe I should say that, and you go to bed at night and it's chattering away and chattering. It's very hard to switch it off. So what this does is, in fact, it's what we call allostatic load. So the allostatus of the brain is a load that steals some of the homeostatic energy. And when this is constant low-level stress, constantly low-level or chronic stress, then there's a sliding scale of non-vital organs get switched off. Cell repair, ovulation, sperm production, digestion, these are all get affected depending on the level of that traumatic stress that's in our brain, of the allostatic load. And that's just the condition of being human. We try to learn things like meditation, transcendental meditation. All that is really is switching off the chatter. That's all that is. So really, we've got a few natural mechanisms that we've built in as humans to deal with this. I mean, over the last 10 million years, God hasn't just gone, right, leave it to you. Evolution has found a few techniques. And what I'm reading these days is there's one particular thing called, it's like a shaking technique where it's involved, you strain the body, you lie on the floor, you lift your legs up and you get the body to shake the spine, and it vibrates and shakes, and it's a trauma release exercise. But, you think evolution might come up with a better system of that, which is natural, and it has. People don't recognize it. One of the things that I studied for a while, because I did have a little bout of depression myself around about 2015. I studied happiness. What's going on with happiness? What does it come from? And William James nailed it with a comment he made. He said, we laugh because we're happy. We're not happy because we laugh. Yeah. And what he said is, well, it's actually the other way around. So we're happy because we laugh. A lot of people think it's the other way around. We're happy because we laugh, right? We don't laugh because we're happy. We're happy because we laugh. And laughter is actually, when you talk about laughter, it's the belly shakes. It's a guffaw. You get that unconscious spasm in your belly. That is the trauma releasing exercise. That's the trauma releasing that we've got naturally built in. And the serotonin that's in our small intestines, which most of it's in there, around about 90%, basically gets regulated. That releases into all of our cells, and the cells become harmonized. So the serotonin is serum, means blood, toner, harmonizer. That's where it comes from. I think it's Greek or Latin.
Nice.
So at the point of when we're told something quite stressful, like a story, and we're waiting for the punchline, that punchline is when we laugh. And that's what basically allows us body to release the trauma of the short-term effects of that. So people don't recognize this is an important thing. Nature has actually built this in, sleep as well. Our brain gets diffused of all of the neurotoxins, and, we've got to give our gut a break. So intermittent fasting is important. We evolved through a system of feast and fast. We didn't eat 3 or 4 times and graze constantly. It's not how we evolved. So, what we're doing with the therapy is getting people back into a normal, what we've evolved to be doing as a healthier way of living, So, we do have these techniques built in. It's just that, it's socially now we're getting laughter removed. Comedians are getting fined for telling jokes. And we have this correctness. And there's going to be a knock-on effect. There's going to be a detrimental effect to people's mental health because of it.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
not.
Any last thoughts before we end our chat for today?
No, I could go on and on about this all day, Ronnie. It's a subject that's close to my heart, and I think, I think, the fact that, I'm going to be doing more teaching and more training in the future. But yeah, as it stands at the moment, I'm focused on mostly just working with the psoriasis. I'm getting good results. It's not 100%, probably 60% I'm getting results. With a bit of a sliding scale, some people are gradually improving over time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's difficult getting people to change their lifestyles. It's easier. People just go and pop a pill and they get a short-term fix. But the biotics and the topical creams, as soon as you stop using them, it comes back much more fiercely.
So if people want to find out more about what you do or connect with you, is there a website? How
yeah, I've got a website. It's not very well furnished, but yeah, johnmartinmoore.com. You can contact me and you can book me through that. And also the IEMT Association, big up the IEMT Association. It's great what Andy Austin's doing.
Definitely.
Yeah, he's a real maverick with that kind of stuff. And I think it's amazing. I think, the changes I've seen in people using IEMT are profound, profound differences in their lives and making people better. Yeah, so that's it on the last word. Yeah, just thanks for having a chat with me today. And
thank you for your time.
Anyone wants to get in touch, just drop me a line and yeah, we can chat.
I'll drop the website and the email in the description. Thanks a lot, John.
All right. Cheers, Ronnie. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.